Welcome to Bible for Modern Minds podcast.
Today, we're looking at a really compelling set of sources. It's the personal testimony of Anthony Stanley.
Right. He's a musician, a worship leader. He runs RAM Global International down in Jacksonville, Florida.
And this isn't, a policy paper. We are analyzing a life that was completely, sometimes violently, turned upside down by these incredibly specific spiritual encounters.
That's the mission here, yeah. To really dissect the chain of events that took Stanley from what he calls a mixed-up life, chasing secular fame, and pushed him into this radical spiritual commitment.
It's about tracking those moments, the physical and prophetic confrontations that just made it impossible for him to keep running.
And it's so interesting because the tension starts really early for him.
Yeah, he grew up in the church, but he saw this huge disconnect. He said he knew the functions of church, the routines.
But not Jesus. He felt he lacked a real authentic relationship with Christ. It was all outward with no real inward conviction.
And yet, that seed of worship was there. I mean, he talks about being 7 years old, leading a song in the choir, and just weeping because he felt the presence of God.
But that feeling, that early connection, was immediately sort of challenged by his environment.
Right.
His parents divorced when he was about 5, and the home life he describes was defined by that one word, mixture.
So he's seeing things that are just completely contrary to what he's being taught in church.
Exactly. Fornication, alcoholism, drug use, cursing, all happening under the same roof.
And that would create a crisis for anyone, especially a kid. It led him to ask this foundational question.
Yeah, and it's a question so many people ask. If God is so powerful,
how come people's lives are not really changing? He looked at the chaos and just concluded, it can't be real.
So he walked away. And he needed a replacement, something tangible to believe in. For him, that was secular rap music.
He actually says music became like a father figure for him. It offered hope, a path to respect, to success.
A clear path. He threw himself into it, started traveling, opening for major artists. Fame was going to be the thing that gave him that identity he was looking for.
And that path continues right through college. He managed to avoid drugs and alcohol, mainly because he'd seen what it did to his family.
But his big struggle, the one he named specifically, was fornication. He just got to a point where he was, in his own words, tired of this lifestyle.
He just hit a wall. He needed to know, for real, if the God he felt as a 7-year-old was genuine or if it was all just emotion.
And that question leads us to really the hinge moment of his entire life. It's not a casual prayer.
No, it's a demand. An ultimatum, almost. He goes into this large closet in his apartment, which he calls his prayer closet.
On a Saturday. And he stays in there praying from 9 in the morning until 9 at night. 12 straight hours.
Just begging God, challenging him to reveal himself.
And this is what's so critical for the analysis. During those 12 hours, nothing happens.
Nothing. He feels nothing, sees nothing. He gets up totally convinced it was a waste of time, that his childhood experiences were all emotions.
So he gives up, he grabs a broom and starts sweeping his apartment. He's done searching.
And it's in that moment of complete surrender, of giving up, that it happens.
Yeah. The sources are so specific here. The Holy Spirit comes in like a mighty rushing wind.
And not gently. It hits him with enough force to knock him face first onto the ground.
He described it as a heaviness, a physical weightiness. He felt, and this is a direct quote, like a dead man.
Which is such a striking phrase. It immediately brings to mind the Apostle John in the book of Revelation.
Exactly. When John sees the glorified Christ, his reaction is to fall at his feet as dead. This experience for Stanley was clearly physical, not just emotional. It was an overpowering presence.
And that physical event just triggers this whole new spiritual reality for him.
Instantly, he's filled with the Holy Spirit and starts speaking in a new language, in tongues.
Which was totally new to him. He says his childhood church didn't have a move of a spirit like that.
So this isn't something he was culturally conditioned to expect. It was a spontaneous result of the encounter.
Then comes the visual part, which this is where it gets even crazier.
He looks up from the floor and sees a cloud hovering over him.
But here's the proof that it wasn't a hallucination. His dog saw it too.
The dog is barking, running in frantic circles, looking right up at this cloud. It's an external witness to what's happening.
An objective observer.
Yeah, and a voice comes from the cloud.
Yeah.
And it's not vague. It's a precise, direct command and a prophecy.
What did it say?
Anthony, I called you to be a prophet to the nations. Leave school and go back home. I'm going to raise you up to be a worship leader.
So, okay, let's just pause here. He gets knocked to the ground,
Yeah.
speaks in a new language, sees a cloud that his dog also sees, and hears a voice from it giving him a direct order.
I mean, about as undeniable as an experience can get.
And his immediate reaction is disobedience. How does that even work?
Yeah.
How is the fear of looking like a failure more powerful than that?
It's the power of human rationalization, isn't it? He keeps it to himself. Obeying meant he had to abandon his entire identity.
The successful secular artist.
Right. He
Yeah.
thought, if I go home, I look like a failure. So he tries to bargain with God. He says, okay, I'll finish my rap album. I'll just make it, more positive. He tries to find a middle ground.
A compromise on a divine command. That rarely works out well.
And that compromise leads directly to what he calls his Jonah experience.
He gets in the car to drive to St. Louis to finish the album. He's actively running from the prophecy.
Yep. He's driving with his producer, and they're sitting at a red light, and the car just stalls. And then smoke.
Oh, wow.
And because the battery was in the back seat, which is very unusual, the car just catches fire rapidly.
And it wasn't just a minor fire.
No, it was total destruction. The fire consumed everything that represented his old life. Clothes, jewelry, money, his phone.
Even his Bible was, as he put it, all tore up. It's like the physical evidence of his plan B was just erased.
Completely wiped out. And then the instruction comes again. He's standing on the street next to the wreck of his car.
And a voice from heaven repeats the prophecy from the closet.
Word for word. I told you to go home. I said you was a prophet to the nations, and I'm going to use you.
And at that point, there's nowhere left to run. He said he realized he wasn't crying for the stuff he lost.
He was crying because he hadn't listened, for the cost of his disobedience.
So that's the moment of surrender, the material loss, the repeated command, it finally broke through.
It did. His first act of obedience was simple. He called his mom.
Who, of course, had been praying for him the whole time. The whole time. He goes home, and because he'd lost everything, he shows up to church that Sunday and just sweats in a T-shirt.
And the confirmation he gets is immediate. The pastor's sermon that morning is about running from God.
Of all things. Then at the end of the service, the pastor asks Stanley to come up and sing.
And then, with no prior conversation, the pastor announces that the Lord had spoken to him and wanted to make Anthony Stanley the new worship leader.
Which was the second part of the prophecy from the closet.
The exact second part. It's this perfect external validation of that private internal encounter.
So this all happened back in 2010. Looking at the last, 13 years or so, he says every part of that prophecy has come true.
Yeah, including learning how to move in the prophetic. And he talks about the fruits of that ministry, seeing so many miracles.
Things like cancer being healed, people being delivered from evil spirits. He connects it back to the story of David playing music for King Saul.
Right. That music itself can be a spiritual weapon, a way to deliver God's power. He and his wife have been doing ministry together since they married in 2013, seeing all of this play out.
But let's circle back to the music itself, because he gives a very specific reason for why he had to completely abandon secular music. It came from another vision.
This is a really crucial piece of the story, especially for anyone who's a creative.
Absolutely. He was opening for a well-known secular rapper. After he finished his set, a voice told him to go to the back of the club and just watch.
And his spiritual eyes were opened. He's watching the main act perform, and he sees dark shadows coming out of his mouth through every word.
And these shadows were literally entering the people in the crowd.
And he could see the immediate effect. The mood of the audience just shifted. The crowd got more violent. The girls got more seductive.
And then that spiritual chaos turned physical. Gunshots broke out in the club. It's just a terrifyingly clear picture of cause and effect.
It is. And the Lord explained it to him this way. The same spirits that torment you while you're making your music will torment others.
Wow. So it's not about morality. It's about spiritual transmission. The source of the art determines its impact.
That's the takeaway. And it caused him to quit secular music on the spot. He realized that the sound created for Christ is 10 times better than what the enemy can give because it liberates instead of torments.
It's a radical way to think about creative responsibility. You have to own the spiritual source of your work.
So his whole journey, the struggle with mixtures, it really boils down to a message about surrender.
About giving up your own will and your own desires.
Exactly. He says the failure isn't in the struggle itself. It's in choosing to listen to the wrong voices, the world, the enemy, your own ego, because you haven't realized how good God's plan for you actually is.
And for him, That relationship with Jesus became everything. It finally gave him the identity he'd been chasing through fame and money.
He really emphasizes that you have to get to know Christ on your own. It can't be your pastor's faith or your parents' faith. It has to become personal.
And he brings it back to that metaphor of believers being the bride of Christ.
Right. Which isn't just a friendship. It implies a marriage, an intimate connection, a total commitment. He says that takes your faith to a whole nother dimension.
Anthony Stanley had to get to the point of losing everything, his career, his possessions, his money, in that fire before he finally obeyed the prophecy he received in his closet.
It's an extreme example of God allowing the destruction of a plan B to force someone into his plan A.
So we want to leave you with this to think about. What small conscious steps might you take today to surrender your own creative or professional rationalizations and, perhaps, avoid your own catastrophic Jonah experience? We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.